I remember back in a time when we first looked at him thinking, wow, is this possible? There's just way too many coincidences going on around him in his life, to getting to the point of going, he did these things, and then getting to the point of being able to prove that he did these things. I mean, it was just this transformation. And from those beginning stages, that's probably one of my most vivid things, is those first initial thoughts of, oh my gosh, like, what do we have really here? And there's just way too many suspect things around this guy. I think he thrived more on the ability to manipulate and control the relationship even while they were still alive for a while, to have that power, and use them for what he could use them for while he could, until he just didn't need it anymore. And so, I think he used LeAnn a lot for some of the financial stuff. I think he manipulated and had a lot of power and control over her, having her dye her hair and having her do all these like crazy things, and threatening her. And I'm sure she was hugely fearful of him. And then when he just got done with it, or he was sick of it and he was ready to move on, he had nothing left that he wanted from her. I hate to say it, but there were times of hysterical laughter, because we were like four-wheel driving through the craziest of terrains. There were times of just pure anger and frustration, because you knew he was leading us on a wild goose chase a little bit. He's, from his prior past experience as a trapper and a guide, and the way his mind is methodically, and the way he talked about it before we went out there, I absolutely felt like, he could take us to that exact same spot. He's lived it in his mind so many times that I knew he could. And when he started to not do it, all of those fears started to come up. I'm like, oof, here we are, we're on this wild goose chase. He's just having his fun with us. And it was a production and a half. We had, God, I don't know how many FBI agents, people with the AR-15, whatever they are, the big, right, huge rifles, and it was just a huge production. We would drive down the road. When we left the hotel, we were driving down the road from Grand Junction and driving up into Utah. There were, say there were 9 big black SUVs right in a row. We had the little white car, but all these, people, you could see people look like, who is that? Is that the president, or who's driving in all those big black dark tinted SUVs? It was quite a production. Then we got off onto this exit, and there you had all this other law enforcement from Grand County and the DA from up there, and then you'd have all these other, what always frustrated me is that I thought, Scott is just so pleased with himself right now. You could see. And it's bizarre, because at that point, what's left is, mainly, for her, it was different than Terry. For her, it was just the bones. And, but you could see it. And as you moved away, and they were working so carefully and diligently to move away the dirts and the rocks, that, she was positioned in this fetal position. And I kept envisioning her in those last moments, that she knew because I'm absolutely convinced that she was walked right to that spot, told to kneel down, that she was either kneeling or already completely in the fetal position when he shot her in the back of the head. And she knew what was happening to her. And just the huge fear that she must have lived and experienced in those moments. And it was incredibly moving. I got the news. I think it was Johnny that called. And I was overwhelmed. I broke down crying. It was very, it was kind of this overwhelming emotion of relief and sadness and excitement, which sounds crazy. I'm sure that the family never felt excited, but from us, it was just this weird combination of emotions. And Amy was down in court, and I went running down to Amy and pulled her out of the courtroom and told her in the hallway, and then her and I hugged and were just, so relieved, and then we both kind of cried, and it was just, it was our first big break. That was our first body
Yeah.
And it was the first break, and I remember we used to just pray for, a break in the case, and something would go our way and something would happen. And that's, I feel like that was part of when the tide started to shift and when we felt like we were getting the momentum. And finally we were getting to a point where could we get it, could we get a provable case? Could we start getting a case together? And, and now, and that's when it kind of felt like it all shifted towards us. And I think Scott felt that too. I mean, he was in control for so long, but then finally he saw, okay, here's a team who's not going to stop, who's going to keep pushing, and things are starting to happen. And I mean, because there's no way to explain why he eventually comes around and ends up taking responsibility and taking the plea deal, besides that he must have thought that we weren't stopping, and he was going to be convicted eventually anyways.